Bom dia, pessoal. Muito obrigado. Obrigado por estarem aqui conosco. Em nome da ICF, eu gostaria de agradecer a presença de vocês todos e apresentar as pessoas que estão nos apoiando aqui nesse evento. A Márcia Leite e a Raquel Viana estão apoiando esse evento e vão compartilhar com você, conosco, as perguntas e comentários que forem feitos. Meu nome é Flávio Kosminski, eu sou um associado da ICF e convido já todos aqueles que não são associados à ICF a considerarem a entrada na associação à ICF. Os benefícios são bastante importantes. A ICF, ou a International Coaching Federation, é a maior associação global de coaches, está presente em mais de 100 países e conta com cerca de 50 mil associados ao redor do mundo. Eu gostaria de agradecer a vocês, aos líderes regionais, aos comitês e ao Conselho Deliberativo. Gostaria de dar boas-vindas ao participante do nosso painel, Loredana Padurian, e agradeço a ela por estar conosco. Nessa International Coaching Week, que é a maior celebração de coaching profissional do mundo, e nessa semana acontecerão cerca de 1000 eventos em mais de 20 idiomas. Esse evento será gravado. Aqueles que procurarem esse evento posteriormente no YouTube da ICF vão encontrar, e o evento concede créditos de educação. Por conta disso, ao final do evento, nós vamos enviar a vocês um formulário para certificação e que sugerimos que os preencham, que receberão de volta os créditos correspondentes. Nós teremos tradução simultânea e aqueles que quiserem assistir à apresentação traduzida, por favor, cliquem naquele globo que tem abaixo da sua tela em português. Os que quiserem assistir em inglês, evidentemente, coloquem na língua inglesa. Eu gostaria de apresentar a vocês a nossa palestrante, a professora Loredana Padurian. Loredana Padurian é uma educadora global, empreendedora, autora e speaker com experiências na Suíça, Itália, Índia, Malásia e nos Estados Unidos. Ela está atualmente na Northeastern University. Passou 8 anos em Kuala Lumpur, na Malásia, como Senior Associate Dean em uma nova escola de negócios, a Asia School of Business. Em 2012, ela recebeu o título de Distinguished Woman Entrepreneur Lifetime Achievement Award da World Women's Economic and Business Summit em Kuala Lumpur. Como fellow da MIT Sloan International School, professora Loredana ensinou em vários programas executivos do MIT e no IMD em Lausanne, em Cambridge. Na Malásia, ela liderou múltiplos programas para várias companhias regionais. Ela é conhecida por seus alunos como um unconventional professor, em função do sua abordagem direta e objetiva. Ela é autora de um livro chamado The Job is Easy, the People Are Not, The 10 Smart Skills to Become Better People, que é o objetivo da nossa palestra, é o tema da nossa palestra. Professora Loredana tem um Master in Arts in Communications and Economics, é um PhD em Management da USI Switzerland. Gostaria de convidar, então, a professora Loredana para iniciar a sua apresentação.
Muito obrigada, Flávio. Bom dia, feliz de estar aqui. Thank you, everybody. I'm so happy to be here. I have to say, Portuguese is my favorite language in the world. I understand really well. I don't speak enough. I hope at some point in my life to get the chance to spend some time in Brazil or in Portugal to improve my Portuguese. But thank you for all the wonderful messages on the chat. I'm able to read in Portuguese, so if anybody wants to ask me questions in Portuguese directly, I'll try to do my very best to understand. We also have a translation, so I'll stay on this channel in English. I'll make sure that I speak a little bit slower, so the translator that we have today has the chance to translate. But like I said, if you feel comfortable to ask me questions directly in the chat, if you want to ask me in English, in Portuguese, in French, in Italian, or in Romanian, I'll be able to address some. So thank you for such a wonderful introduction. I have to say, Flavio, I sound a lot more remarkable in Portuguese than I sound in English. So I feel really good about myself now after that beautiful introduction. So Flavio gave me this amazing opportunity to speak to people of your caliber, people who are coaches, extraordinary coaches around the world who want to always try to continue to be better, to speak about the subject that I think every single one of us face on a daily basis, which is people and the challenges of working with people. So as Flavio mentioned, I wrote this book recently. It's called The Job is Easy, The People Are Not. And I would like to share with you some thoughts. We have about an hour for this. I see that we have some technical issues in the background. I hope we can figure that out. There are some issues with the sound and with the translation. But I hope we can figure those out. So like Flavio said, I am a professor at Northeastern University in Boston. I also teach at MIT Sloan in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I am originally from Transylvania, Romania, and I have quite an international experience around the world. And the book that I recently wrote, The Job is Easy, The People Are Not, has been the top 7 books of MIT last year. We also have a series of video podcasts and audio podcasts for anybody who wants to listen more after this talk. So why the job is easy, the people are not? Why am I interested in this subject? So I used to be, like Flavio mentioned, I used to be the senior associate dean of a new business school that we built together with MIT Sloan in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. And for about 8 years, I spent my career not being a professor only, but mostly being a leader. And at the end of this almost 8 years of leadership, I realized how extraordinarily difficult it is to be a leader, and how difficult it is to deal with people. And most studies about people demonstrate that it's the hardest part of working in a job. And you're all coaches, so you know this very, very well. And what it's interesting is that about 25% of our time we actually spend on complaining about people. Isn't that interesting? Out of 5 days a week, you know, more than a day we spend about complaining about people. It's mind-boggling. Why is that? Well, it is very difficult to work with people. And actually, if you try to study this subject, you will see that it's the most popular topic in the world of management. There are over 10,000 books written on this topic on Amazon alone. And some of those have very straightforward titles. Surrounded by Idiots, The Asshole Survival Guide, Good Boss, Bad Boss, The Laws of Human Stupidity. Actually, the title of my book originally, it was supposed to be I Hate People and Other Management Lessons. Because after 8 years of leadership, I realized that I'm either not a very good manager or there's something very wrong with the people that I work with. And it turns out that the truth is somewhere in the middle. And the reason why it's so complicated is because we are on one hand, we are like machines. We have these amazing capabilities of doing things. But on the other hand, we have a lot of humanity. So that makes our life quite complicated. So let me take you back to how this, research project that turned into a book, that turned into coaching, came to life. So, like I said, about 8 to 10 years ago, when I do a lot of consulting and a lot of coaching and a lot of executive coaching and executive education, and many of my clients, especially from technical backgrounds, engineering, construction, MIT is a very technical school. They say, we want to train our people, but we want to train them on the important skills, the hard skills, right? Technology, physics, mechanics, etc. But what we have learned is that the more they advance in their careers, the more they need soft skills. So we hire them for hard skills. We promote them for soft skills. So I started to look a little bit at the meaning of the word soft and hard. It turns out that they have a very different meaning, because the word soft means something that it's gentle, that it's fragile, that it's delicate, and very importantly, feminine. Whereas the word hard is challenging, difficult, resilient, masculine. So I started by simply saying, maybe we have to really rethink the way we call these skills. Because if somebody says, the more I advance in my career, the more I reach a higher level of leadership, the more I need to use soft skills, there's nothing soft about managing people, dealing with complexity, managing diversity, managing your board. So this project started by simply changing the words, which I'll show you a little bit later. But it also was supported by the fact that the world of management is evolving. We are evolving from a very transactional management to a much more relationship-based management. So transactions is very much based on rules, on titles. Relationship, it's a lot more based on skills and the capacity to develop skills together. So this combination, along with the fact that people have primarily two important needs in life, which is to connect and to achieve, made me realize that we really need to think about how we think about skills, especially the skills that we need as we advance in our careers. So my initial suggestion was, let's try to see what happens if we replace the word soft with smart and the word hard with sharp. I hope the translation in Portuguese makes sense, but our goal, once again, was try to see what happens if we change the words. So we think of smart skills as the skills required to develop together with people and for the people. And we think of sharp skills as the skills required to develop for technology and with technology. So today, I will primarily speak about smart skills. Other people call them people skills, human skills, critical skills, whatever you want. I prefer to call them smart because if you don't have them, you're not very smart. And then the next step was to think about the skills of the future. I'm a professor. I am also a leader. My job is to think about what do we want to teach in the world of business. We can call them socioeconomic emociones. Yes, absolutely. It is part of socio-emociones. We can think of them like that. I just wanted to have a very simple and sort of memorable word to that. But absolutely, Luciana, thank you for that. So the next thing we wanted to do was to look at what type of skills we have to invest on one hand on our future graduates, but also on all the clients that we work with. On the right side of the screen, you see sharp skills or technical skills. On the left side of the screens, you see competencias socioemocionales, right? Or smart skills. And it's not just that, because somebody could say, hey, there's a lot of skills that are missing. Where's communication? Where is innovation? So I think of the skills as skills that are essential, but they are completely missing from the way we teach, learn, and understand people. And also, for example, communication is not a skill. I think communication, it's a context that requires a lot of skills in order to be delivered, but that's another story. So for today, I'm going to speak primarily about the smart skills. And because we only have an hour, I'm just going to give you maybe 2 or 3 a little bit in depth. But I will give you the rest of the slides. And also, like I said, if you guys want, we have a lot of free content on the podcast, on the video podcast, on Spotify. So you can listen to more content if you're interested. So if you look at this list, some of these are probably more popular, more, we know of them, and some of them are less known. But like I said, I identified the skills as, it's the same as the title of my book. The name of the podcast is The Job is Easy, the People Are Not. So, for example, I started to think about emotions or the role that emotions play in the workplace. And me, and probably many of you, are familiar with the concept of emotional intelligence, right? We hear about emotional intelligence all the time. We say that we have to develop emotional intelligence. Now, emotional intelligence is one thing. I think emotional intelligence is the base. Emotional intelligence means that you have the capability of recognizing people's emotions as well as your own. Recognizing, however, emotions is not enough. What it's required as you advance in your career, as you advance in age, you require a control of your emotions. More than recognizing emotions, you need to learn how to control them. And I'm very much aware that I speak to a global audience, but I also speak to an audience that it's probably mostly South American. And we have, yes, we'll send you the presentation, Andrea and Angela. So we have, we have a lot of Latinidad, if you want. I come from a Latin country. Romania, it's a Latin country. So we have a lot of expression of emotions. Emotional maturity, I see Maria smiling, Marcia smiling. Emotional maturity doesn't mean you cannot smile, that you cannot express your emotions, that you cannot be your true self. It just means that you have to learn what amount of emotions to express in what context. So for example, if I have an extraordinarily stressful meeting, a very, very difficult negotiation, a very complicated dialogue, I have the choice to control how my emotions respond to the situation, because it's not just intellectual discussion, but it's also a lot of emotional discussion. So emotional maturity at the end of the day is not measured by age or experience. We have seen people who are extraordinarily young and they have an extraordinary control of their emotions, as well as we have seen people who are quite advanced in age and they are very, very emotionally fragile or emotionally immature. So it's how you can control the inner child. And, psychologists, and I'm not a psychologist, I am studying psychology, but I'm not a psychologist. Psychologists say that many of us, due to childhood trauma or various situations that happen in our early stage life, we can actually stop growing emotionally at a certain age. And you could be a 45-year-old adult, physical adult, with the emotional age of a, I don't know, teenager. So emotional maturity, if you want to have a simple memory of it, is how do you manage your inner child? And there's many examples of how emotionally immature people act versus emotionally mature people. So for example, an emotionally mature person can be childlike. You can be playful, you can be joyful, you can be excited. That is not immaturity. Immaturity is, instead of childlike, you are childish. I hope we can translate this. So you can be playful, but emotionally immature means childish. You are reactive. You throw tantrums. You are, an emotionally mature person is passionate. An emotionally immature person can be irrational. Immature people can be fearful, can be needy, can be very, very big, or the opposite, can hide in their feelings, can be passive aggressive, can give you the silent treatment. And to be honest, many of us work with people like this. And most of you, if you're a coach, you are probably hired because you need to help an individual who has extraordinary intellectual capabilities, but have a very hard time manage their emotional immaturity. And I cannot tell you the amount of adults in top leadership positions that I deal with on a very current base that are exceptional business people and extraordinarily immature individuals. Because the reality is that not all of us have the same emotional age. See, physical age can be measured. I am 47, you are 52, you are 24, you are 36. We know the physical age. The emotional age is impossible to pinpoint, not only because it's not directly correlated to the physical age, but also because it's variable. So today I could be feeling mature, in control of my emotions. I feel like I had a very good sleep. I had a decent breakfast. I had a good cup of coffee. I have an agenda that I can control. I am in charge of my emotions. The problem is that when people start to disregard their physical well-being, most of the time it gets manifested in negative ways on their emotional being. So you can see individuals who are naturally very mature, and because they have moments of extraordinary stress or burnout, they are becoming very immature. So those are temporary moments of immaturity. On the other hand, we have individuals who can constantly be very immature. They can shout very easily. They have a very easy time expressing everything they are feeling, and they are not afraid to show it. Thank you so very much for the comment. I love that you like the clarity and the depth of this this argument. Thank you, Rosangela. Now, I would like to tell you that every single one of these 10 smart skills that I'm going to speak about, they are all interconnected, because humans in our cognitive, emotional, intellectual capabilities, we are all extremely connected and very complex. So it's very, very hard to completely separate who we are. So another aspect that I noticed that can create a lot of problems, but is not really ever considered, is validation. Maybe somebody turn on their mic. If you have a question, feel free to ask me. But validation, for example, I don't know how we say in Portuguese validation, because can you say that again? Did somebody try to ask me a question, or you just?
It's validação.
Validação.
Yes, not different from English.
So I like I said, I don't know if we use validation, even in English, if we use it in the proper way, but validation or validação is not a compliment. Validation, actually it is a little bit reconocimiento, is the ability to recognize based on data, based on evidence, somebody's contributions, somebody's feelings, somebody's options, somebody's in general value to the organization, right? So I can say to Rosangela, I really appreciate the fact that you gave me instant feedback, that you told me what you appreciate about this, and that you highlighted the simplicity and the clarity of this presentation. By you saying that, you actually gave me confidence to move forward. So that's a very, very mini example of validation. So it does, absolutely, you're absolutely right. There's an iPhone here who said this. It's a universal need to be recognized, to feel valued, to be, to feel like you matter. And it's one of the most powerful motivational tools. However, even though it is so important, even though it is so critical, either we do it very little, many of us as managers, we don't do it enough, or we don't know how to ask for it, or we do it too much, or we are surrounded by people who want too much of it. So now, connected to emotional maturity, people who have a very low emotional maturity, so people who are immature emotionally, also have, that's very nice, Rosangela, it's a mirror of the soul. So people who have a very low emotional maturity, they tend to also have a very high need for validation. So if somebody, for example, is emotionally immature, they constantly need to be told that they matter, they are important, they are essential, they are beautiful, they are smart, they are everything. They are important. And this, you know, what you have here on the screen, it's a spectrum, right? All of us have a little bit of this. All of us have a little bit of narcissism. All of us have a little bit of people pleasers. Some of us have a little bit more on the spectrum. And the way the high need for validation, I call it validation addiction or validation addicts. The way some people demand validation all the time, it makes them become extremely toxic for an organization. They are the ones who will always say, I matter more, I contributed more, I work harder, my team was there first, we deserve more. So they always want to find ways to be the center of attention. Now, on one hand, we have what we call narcissist. And narcissists, I have to say, they are very easy to identify in a crowd because they will always be pointing out to themselves. They really love to talk about themselves. They love to put themselves forward. They exaggerate a lot of their achievements, and they have a sense of entitlement. So that's one side of the extreme. But on the other side of the extreme, we also have validation seekers or validation addicts that we call people pleasers. And you know what's sad is that both people pleasers and narcissists, they have the same needs and the same fear. Yes, unfortunately, Rebecca, the book is only on Kindle because we sold out on paperback. But if you want, I can send you my email, or I can give my email to Flavio, and he can type it in the chat, and I can send you a free PDF of the book, so you don't have to buy the Kindle option. I'm sorry, we sold out in 3 months, and I'm self-publishing, so I didn't have time to print more books, but you know, I'll give you a free copy, Rebecca. Maybe Flavio, you can type in the chat my email address. I don't mind if people send me emails. So like I said, on one hand, we have this other extreme of the spectrum, which is people pleasers. And you might think that a people pleaser is easier to work with than a narcissist. on the surface, they are, because on the surface, they seem to work hard. They want to please you all the time. They want to make sure that you have all your needs met. But the reason why they do it is very, very similar to narcissists. The reason they do it is to make sure that they receive attention. The advantage of dealing with the narcissist is that they ask for it. They are very, very, very comfortable to ask for attention. The people pleasers want you to give them attention without them asking. And when you don't, they become very difficult to work with, because they sort of expect you to read their mind, to read their emotions, to read their feelings. And I have to say, the problem with working with both sides of the spectrum is that they really suck the energy out of the room. The title of the book is The Job is Easy, The People Are Not, which is the title of this talk. So I want to save some room for questions, but like I said, feel free to go to the chat to also ask me questions. But what I would like to say is, once again, they are all interconnected. So people who have very high emotional maturity require very little validation, because either external or internal, they don't need somebody else to tell them that they are valuable, they are important, they appreciate it, and everybody needs to feel appreciated. So you should definitely practice validation, but you should also recognize the excessive need for it. And I'm sure many of the clients that you coach probably are told by their environment that they are annoying, that they suck the energy out of the room, that they make everything about themselves, that they make it personal. Unfortunately, like I said, we only have an hour to talk about this, but there's a lot of nuances. I was working with a colleague of mine who was one of my subordinates, and nobody in the team wanted to work with him. And I started asking around why, because he's always so eager to help. But what I noticed is that he would come to my office and sort of wait by the door for me to notice him. And I said, yes, what can I do for you? Nothing. I just want to tell you that I'm here. I'm at work. I'm here. And I'd be like, well, that's kind of your job. You're supposed to be here. You're an adult. You're 48 years old. Okay, good job. You made it in time. Great. The next day he would be like, did you notice what I did yesterday in the meeting? I said, no, what did you do? Oh, I took notes for everybody in the room. I was like, okay, isn't that your job? Yes, but did you see how well I did it? The third day is like, boss, I went and I spoke to some client about what you do, and they said they're going to write you back. And, I really need you to talk to them. They are a very important client. I was like, okay, we're going to talk to them. We have other important clients, but no, this is the most important because I put a lot of work. And in time, I noticed that every single day, every single thing that he did, even the smallest thing, it was the most important thing. It was the biggest thing. And he always needed an excessive need of recognition and affirmation, to the point that most of my colleagues didn't want to work with him. And they were like, he just sucks the energy out of the room, which is hard to explain. How does somebody suck the energy? But you know it very well. We work with people who are energy vampires, to the point where we had to say, if you don't improve your behavior, we're going to have to let you go. So I actually hired a coach like you in this room to say, you really need to understand where this deep need for validation comes from. Why are you so insecure? Thank you, Adilene. Because most people like this are extraordinarily insecure. They are so afraid. Validation, high need for validation is fear. There's a lot of fear that I'm not good enough, that I'm not smart enough, that I'm not, performing enough. So yes, I am sure that you observe all the nuances in your experience. Like I said, I'm speaking to experts, so I'm just showing you what I have learned, but you probably know so much more than I do. So another smart skill that we identified as something that we talk about a lot and we expect people a lot is adaptability. The challenge is that we keep asking people, you have to learn how to adapt. You have to learn how to adapt. We adapted to 3 months of COVID. Now it's going to be 6 months. Now it's going to be a year. You have to adapt to learn from home, to work from home. Then you have to adapt to work hybrid. Now you have to adapt to come back to the office. We always ask people to adapt. We had VUCA. Now we had something else. We always ask people to adapt. But what is adaptability? And how is it that some of us are very good at adapting and some of us are not? So there's a very famous psychologist. His name is Daniel Siegel. And Daniel Siegel, Professor Siegel, says that individuals have different windows of tolerance for change. So some of us have a very wide window, and some of us have a very narrow window. So Julian asked me a really interesting question about validation. Julian, let me go to adaptability and I'll come back to your question. It's a really, really good question. And I really appreciate that. So and once again, adaptability, like I said, it's something that we use and abuse every single day as a concept, but we actually don't really think about it properly. So it turns out that in the space of adjustment to change, too much change, there's a lot of people keep coming in. So I keep admitting people on the waiting room. If somebody else in the team can admit people in the waiting room, that would be great. So on one hand, if you have a lot of change, if you have a lot of stimulation, your nervous system becomes very overhyped, overstretched, overworked. So what people go through when they have excessive moments of change, excessive moments of adaptability, they become too hyper, they become too aggressive. On the other hand, if you have a job, a career, a personal or professional situation where you have a lot of stress, but it's the same type, every day it's the same, every task is similar, every activity that you do is very, very similar, and there's no change whatsoever, which, by the way, that is also very, very stressful. You have the opposite. You can actually become bored, you can become numb, you can be even depressed. So what we are saying is that we ask people to adapt a lot to situations without realizing that not all of us have the same tolerance for stimulation. And recently, I became very interested by neuroscience and the sort of the science behind how our brain works. And there is something here about the nervous system and how our nervous system dictates how we behave. So, for example, as you all know, we have two functions of the nervous system. We have a sympathetic function, which is responsible for work, for going, for fight, for flight. And then we have what we call a parasympathetic function. So this is sympathetic, parasympathetic, that is responsible for rest, digest, and relax. If the functions of our nervous system, either one or the other, are hyperstimulated, we are in an unbalance. So I'm sure that many of your clients talk about burnout, talk about extreme fatigue. They talk about mental fatigue. Mental fatigue leads into emotional immaturity. Emotional immaturity leads into a very high need for validation. You also can connect it to how much your nervous system, either sympathetic or parasympathetic, has been over or super stimulated. Now, before I move on, I want to talk a little bit about the question that we have by Julian here. So Julian is asking, how do you recognize the if the need for validation is related to the personality or related to a particular moment that this person is dealing in time? Excellent question. So you have to look at history. If you have a chance to look at the history, if you have an individual client, what I would say is ask them to talk about the particular moment or the particular person. So let's say that you have been working extraordinarily hard on a project, and you spent a lot of hours, you spent a lot of nights, you spent a lot of energy, and so you invested a lot in this project. And when you present the project, you don't receive recognition. Now, there's a really, really important separation here. Feedback, it's not the same as validation, right? Feedback is an opportunity to improve on something. Validation is an opportunity to recognize something or someone. So recognition versus improvement. If in this specific case, the person felt like they worked a lot and they have not received any recognition, they only felt like they received feedback, they will feel less validated. Why is that? If I go back to the neuroscience function, validation releases a lot of dopamine. That's why we love it so much. That's why people become addicted to it, because validation in our brain, the neuroreceptors for validation are the ones that receive a lot of dopamine. So if I say, Marcia, wonderful work, you did such a good thing, your brain receives dopamine. So it's possible that this person feels very frustrated because they have not received dopamine. Now, you talk to them and try to help them understand if their frustration is related to the moment, or you can ask them, have you felt like this in the past before? Do you feel like people don't recognize your work? Tell me a little bit about other moments in time when you felt in similar ways. If you can ask feedback from others about the behavior of this person, you can understand better, Julian, if this is a moment or if this is a pattern of behavior. And if it's a pattern of behavior, without pretending to be a psychologist, because I am not, you have to understand that a very high need for validation usually goes back in the past. It starts probably with early and late childhood, when the person, the young person, the child at that point, feels disconnected emotionally from their environment. Either parents, social environment, their friends, there's something there. And in time, that disconnection keeps growing bigger and bigger. Thank you for that question. Patricia, I agree. I think neuroscience is absolutely essential for coaches today. And if I could go back to school, I really would only study neuroscience, because I think it gives us a much more scientific explanation of behavior. It's not psychology. Psychology is an interpretation of behavior, which is essential. But I think neuroscience gives you the science and then the scientific tools to deal with this. So we have about 12 minutes left. I want to talk maybe about followership, and then I also want to talk about cognitive readiness, because these two are concepts that are very either unused or misused. So followership, I'm an adult. I was a leader for many years, and not once, thank you very much, Patricia, not once I heard about this concept of followership. We keep talking about leadership, but when I became a leader, I realized how much I have to practice followership. And I don't mean followership as the capacity to follow people, to be a follower, to be a servant, to be, just a sheep. But the more I advance in my career, the higher level you are, the more you have to practice followership, which I love the Army definition, is the capability to follow a character, a commitment that acts in the support of the needs and the goals of a team or of a company. And I think this too, followership, and leadership should be one. I think a lot of leaders don't realize the importance of practicing followership as a CEO. As a CEO, you have a board. As a CEO, you have stakeholders. As a CEO, you have shareholders. As a CEO, you have staff. You actually have to practice a lot of this followership, which once again is the willingness to follow an agreed upon plan. Now, once again, it doesn't mean that I'm a sheep, which see this is number 1 here on the screen, or survivors. It's not that. What we are looking for, we're looking for number 5. We're looking for effective followers, for people who are independent thinkers, who can fight with you, right? So if Edilena and I are in a meeting and she and I do not agree, and we keep fighting, and Edilena has a stronger argument and she wins, when I finish that meeting, I will follow what Edilena and I agreed on, even though emotionally I'm not happy about it. Now, to be a very effective follower, you need to be highly emotionally mature. And what would help is if Edilena gives me some validation, so she can say, look, Loredana, you fought well, your arguments were strong, but I do think that this plan is better for the organization. So she validates my fears. She releases some dopamine in me. So I don't feel only stress. I don't feel only cortisol. So Edilena and I, our negotiation, she won, I lost, but we agreed to go this way. Now I have to practice what we call effective followership. I'm not following Edilena. I'm following the agreement. I'm following the mission of whatever we agreed on. Make sense? Okay. So this is an important one, and I really want to spend a little bit of time with this one. And then, like I said, I'm happy to take your questions. Feel free to ask more questions in the chat. I really appreciate it, and I have the chat here. But I think one of the most important skills, thank you, Mariam, finally something makes sense. Who can we lead if we are? Yes, absolutely. So one of the most important skills that was identified in the world of management, especially at senior leadership, and now I'm talking about CEOs levels, is a concept called cognitive readiness. So cognitive readiness, I think it's called preparação mental. My Portuguese is horrible, but it's being mentally ready. Thank you, Alien. So it's a combination of healthy paranoia, because there's different types of paranoia. I'll talk about that in a second. And then system thinking. I'll talk about each. So healthy paranoia is pretty much scenario planning. Projeção cognitiva. Thank you, Vladimir. Projeção cognitiva. Beautiful. Man, I love Portuguese so much. Next year, I'll come and speak in Portuguese, all right? I'm not going to be good, but I'll try very hard. So cognitive readiness, like I said, it's a function of two. Healthy paranoia is scenario planning. But it's important to think about it, not just to plan. So there is organizational readiness. So organizations need to make plans. There's cognitive readiness, which is mental, but there's also emotional readiness, right? So I think about it, and I'll come back to that question, Cecilia. I think about it, and then I emotionally get ready for it. And healthy paranoia says that I'm going to think about every worst case scenario possible, and I'm going to make a plan for every worst case scenario. And within the plan, I will think and I will feel ready for that plan to happen. Along with healthy paranoia, you need also an extraordinarily complex skill. By the way, it's actually a sharp skill. So system thinking, it's a sharp skills from the technical skills, that it's a way of looking at the world by understanding relationships between different parts. So for example, at the beginning of the pandemic, in 2020, my CEO, my boss, called us all in the office on January 2020, and he said, in 2 months, the borders will close and we are going into lockdown, and we have to start buying food for our students. We have to send the international students home, and we have to prepare for a big lockdown. And all of us thought, he's crazy. But what he actually did, he applied what we call at MIT system dynamics or system thinking. And he said this, in system thinking, if something happens within one system, so if I have 5 fingers, and if something happens to one of these fingers, the other ones will be affected. And once the other ones get affected, another one will get affected. So you really have to understand consequences of relationships. So in cognitive readiness, leaders have this challenge of thinking in 2 ways at the same time. That's why a lot of CEOs or a lot of top leaders, they will tell you that they are mentally tired. I'm sure many of your clients say, I'm mentally tired. I have, mental fatigue. Why is that? The brain thinks in 2 ways. On one hand, we think in automatic way. Think about driving, right? Today, I took a drive to see my house in the country. I'm not a very good driver because I don't practice a lot. I don't have a car in US. I don't have a car in Asia. So I don't drive a lot. I have to be very, very attentive, very careful. I drive slow and it takes me a lot of energy. And I'm sure that, for example, if Sonia and I drive, Sonia, if she practiced a lot, she drives in automatic way. She doesn't really think about it. She's been driving a lot, right? She can do other things in her head. She can probably listen to music. She can talk to me in the car. But if I'm the driver and Sonia is in the car with me, I'm going to tell Sonia, Sonia, por favor, I need to focus. I need to concentrate. Please don't play music and don't talk to me because I need a lot of mental capacity to do this task. So Professor Daniel Kahneman, who won the Nobel Prize for this, says that people have 2 ways of thinking. Automatic is for fast, exactly, Vladimir. Conscious is for slow. Slow is complex decisions. They require a lot of effort. They take a lot of time. They require a lot of energy. Automatic is simple, fast, but also can create a lot of mistakes. In cognitive readiness, we have to do both. So on one hand, you're thinking automatically about all the things that you have to do as a CEO, as a leader, as a coach. But on the other hand, you have to solve complex problems that require a lot of space. So that's why this capacity of cognitive thinking, it is so complicated because most of us have separate space for doing either one or the other. Cognitive readiness says, not only I think both fast and slow at the same time, but I have to think about the future, make the plans. I have to think about the present, deal with what I have. I have to think about the past. So my past informs the future and the present. So let me take Cecilia's question. How did I get this top 10? So I said in the beginning, Cecilia, that when we identified the top 10 smart skills, it was a choice. And the choice was to see. So I looked at all my clients and I looked at all my students, and I pretty much looked at a lot of feedback forms and performance evaluations. And I looked at what people complain about other people. What is it that we love about working with others? And what is it that working with others makes it so hard? And what I noticed is that a lot of people complain about colleagues who have a very low emotional maturity. They don't use the word emotional maturity, of course, but they say this person is very explosive, or this person gets upset very easily. This person gives me the silent treatment. a lot of emotions. Other ones, for example, like validation, came because, once again, when I started to listen to my clients, when I started to watch my students, when I started to read performance evaluations, I noticed that there's this theme of people constantly, being upset or complaining about other people for wanting too much, or others feeling that they are not getting enough. So, like I said, Cecilia, you can come up with your own top 10. This is what I've noticed, that we seem to be missing the most, but we don't ever teach. It's almost like this is common sense. But if this is common sense, why is it that it's not more common? Right? And before I wrap up and I take a few more questions, I want to tell you something else. Thank you. I want to tell you something else. So I know that probably all of you can relate to the title, right? Common sense is not that common. Absolutely. Yes, I'll come to that question, Anna. If somebody can translate in Portuguese the title of my book in the chat, I would appreciate that. So the job is easy, the people are not. El trabajo es fácil. I assume that's what we said, the job is easy, right? But I want to tell you something, that there's actually a big mistake in this title. O trabajo es fácil, a pessoas não são. Thank you. But there is a big mistake in this title, because I don't know if you noticed that I kept saying throughout this presentation, the people, the colleagues. Some people are like this, some people are like that. The reason why I actually don't even want you to buy the book is because the title is wrong, and I really need to write another one. The reality is that it's not that the job is easy, the people are not. The reality is that we are the people that are not easy. Every single one of us in this room, Anna and Tanya and Luciana and Eduardo and Flavio and Andrea, every single one of us are the people that we always seem to be complaining about. And maybe the real title should be, the job is easy, I am not. I as in the universal I. Because in my entire life, and you are all coaches and you are so much better than I am, I want you to think of a moment when a client came to you and says, my colleagues are amazing, I am terrible. I have low emotional maturity, I lose my patience, I am not validating enough, I don't know how to adapt. It's always others, right? And it's always about what others trigger. So, ladies and gentlemen, please accept this moment of humility to say, after 1 year of publishing this book, after 1 year of giving over 100 talks, by the way, this morning at 4 o'clock, I gave a talk on this topic. Tomorrow morning at 4 o'clock, I give a talk on this topic. Friday, I give a talk on this topic. Next week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, I give a talk on this topic. And it seems like every single one of us resonate to this title. We all believe that is the other people. And it took me 1 year to realize, no es verdad. Is I am not. Thank you very much. Thank you all. So let me stop here and take the question. One of you had this really, really great question. Thank you, guys. You are so great validators. So there was a really interesting question. Is it possible that the person is emotionally immature and the culture and the environment triggers even more? Absolutely. That's a brilliant question, Anna. So if one works in a very, very stressful environment, in a toxic environment, in an environment where we don't really respect individuality, thank you, everybody, that can trigger you more. And then I want to tell you something else. Behavior is contagious. The way I behave, especially as a leader, it's going to dictate the way other people behave around me. So if somebody is naturally emotionally immature, so they lose their patience easily, they are very easily triggered, they have a lot of expression of emotions, that becomes the norm. So absolutely, absolutely. Thank you very, very much. Jose Roberto, I also understand Spanish. I don't speak very well. It's quite possible that difficult people cannot appreciate they are difficult. That is such a good question, Amalia. So Somebody asked me, and I have it in the talk, who is this book for? Because the difficult people will not read it. And I'll end with this. None of us are responsible for changing the difficult people. The only responsibility we have is to better understand ourselves and understand ourselves how to deal with difficult people. Thank you all. Thank you. Flavio, back to you.
Yes, thank you, Loredana. I have a question which might be of interest to coaches. The thing is, we are all used to expressions like, before we start a coaching engagement, he's too rude, or this executive is rude, or he doesn't relate well to people, or he takes decisions too fast. And you bring a new framework, which I might say a new language, talk about people. And the question is, have you ever considered translating or developing a kind of an assessment related to those 10 SMART skills, so that we might assess individuals that need some sort of change in their way of work?
So thank you, Flavio, for that. I get that question a lot. And I would say the 10 SMART skills are not a comprehensive personality package. There's way beyond more of this. And for almost every single skill, there are already personality tests out there. So you can actually measure somebody's emotional maturity. You can use the Hogan. You can measure somebody's adaptability already. So I don't want to create redundancy, because you can actually measure all this. My goal was not necessarily to give people self-diagnosing tools, because they already exist. My goal was rather to highlight or to bring awareness of this more than anything. Because, like I said, you can actually get tested today on your emotional maturity, on adaptability, on all of these things. Adam Grant and Dow came up with this amazing new personality test. You can test your humility. So there's a lot of psychologists who already do this. I'm not one of them.
Okay. Loredana, I think you also reading lots of compliments for your presentation. It was a pleasure to have you here. It was very insightful. So do we have more questions? If not, okay, go ahead, Loredana. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I was just coughing and trying to hide my cough.
Okay.
But I'm also, like I said, I'm also happy to connect with people on LinkedIn. If you guys want to send me an email, I'll be happy to send you a free PDF of the book, as long as you don't put it online, so it's free for everybody to access it. I'm happy to send you a copy. I just want to say one thing before I let you all go, Flavio, is that in 2017, so 2 years into my leadership role, I had a massive leadership crisis. And I started to have really, really low emotional maturity. I had a very high need for validation. My colleagues would constantly say about me that I'm a bitch. And I got called into my boss's office. I also got physically very sick. I developed a tumor. I believe very much in the correlation between mental health and physical health. So my boss called me in the office and he said, if you don't change your behavior, we're going to have a very different conversation. So very reluctantly, I hired a coach. I was very reluctant. I was like, the hell, a coach is going to teach me? I'm a professor. I know all this stuff. I invented the management theory. I had 3 sessions with this coach and it changed my life. It really did. I mean, all he did, he held a mirror. He was like, look at yourself in the mirror and let's talk a little bit about what's going on. And he gave me a couple of very simple, once again, commonsensical tools. And it really, really changed my behavior. And more than anything, it changed my relationship to coaching. And even though I'm not what somebody would call officially a coach, I have been telling every day my clients, do not underestimate the power of coaching. If you don't believe in psychiatry and psychology and in a therapist, find yourself a coach. Because we go to the gym, we get a coach. We try to lose weight, we get a nutritionist. Why don't we get help when we need mental and emotional help? So you guys are doing Lord's job, the job of God. I'm so grateful for all of you and so happy to be here. Thank you. Thank you all.
Loredana, we thank you very much. It was an awesome presentation, and we hope to have you back with us anytime soon. So thank you all. Thank you for your presence here, and I ask you to please do not forget to fill in your request for credits and your evaluation of this presentation. So thank you.
Thank you all, and muito obrigada. Thank you very much. Very
Thank you,
nice.
Loredana. It was
Thank
great.
you all.
It was great.
Bom dia, obrigado.
Tchau, tchau. Obrigada.
Tchau, tchau. Tchau, obrigada. Tchau, tchau. Au revoir. Au revoir.
Tchau, tchau. Thank you.
Muito
Tchau,
bem.
tchau.
Tchau.
Muito obrigada.
Muito obrigada.